A crisis happens at your church. Within minutes, people are texting. Someone posts something on social media. Parents are calling. The congregation wants answers. A reporter contacts the church, and your church leadership team is still trying to determine exactly what happened. Then someone asks, what are we going to say? If your church hasn't answered that question before the crisis, you're already behind. Today, we're talking about crisis communication because when every word matters, leadership must be prepared to communicate. Welcome to the Faith Secure podcast, where we are watchful, prayerful, and prepared. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Brown, and I am delighted to have today as our guest, Mr. Monty J. Chambers, a consultant, instructor, and public speaker with more than 16 years of experience. Monty leads Monumental Access, a consulting firm specializing in crisis communications, public relations, human behavior, and leadership development. His work includes helping organizations develop comprehensive crisis communication strategies, advising senior executives during complex situations, and coaching leadership teams to communicate effectively, to maintain trust, and manage public perception during critical incidents. Monty also brings hands-on experience in emergency response and law enforcement, which gives him an especially valuable perspective on communication when situations are moving quickly and information may still be developing. I recently had the opportunity to hear Monty speak and connect with him at the Faith-Based Security Network conference. Monty, I want to welcome you to the Faith Secure podcast. How you doing, sir?
There we go. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. I appreciate it for the wonderful introduction. I'm like, man, who is he talking about?
I love it. I'm talking about you, my friend.
Yeah, well, I'm deeply humbled. Thank you so much for having me on here, and I look forward to the conversation.
All right. You ready to dive right in?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Okay. I want to talk to you about when the crisis becomes a communication crisis. Okay. Let's begin with the fundamental question. Let's start at Genesis. Why should crisis communication be part of a church's emergency preparedness strategy rather than something leaders figure out after the incident occurs?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I'll say this, that it's important, like when you're dealing with a crisis, people never rise to the occasion. They fall to the level of systems.
Amen.
And so I am a huge fan of preparation and doing things before a tragedy occurs, because it gives you a reference point and it gives you something that you can healthily be able to fall back on.
Yes, sir.
Instead of trying to manage in the moment. Because what we've seen from the research is that when individuals are actually in the thicket of a crisis, whatever that may be on the spectrum, you're utilizing a lot of brain power.
Okay, yes.
And it's better to have things written out in a contextual standpoint, from like a checklist and or some type of manual that you can reference, because you're not going to have the bandwidth to try to processes in the moment. You're going to need to utilize that energy to actually be present in the moment.
Okay. And that was very well said, Monty. I just want to ask you this. Based on what you said, is it fair to say that sometimes an organization can actually experience two crises? The original incident and then the second crisis can be created by how the organization communicates about it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is fair. And this is the irony of dealing with a crisis, because it's almost like the crisis itself exposes other layers of weak points throughout a church's either leadership team and or the organization's reputation. In other words, their ability to be able to manage or weather a storm. And so the two crises you're referring to, I mean, we can kind of look at it from like almost like a social psychology standpoint: primary trauma and then secondary trauma, if you will.
Right. Okay.
So the whole idea, like you mentioned, the crisis could be an incident that happens at a church. That's the major crisis. Emotions are real high. things seem rather chaotic. Things are all over the place. You have an element of fog, and I'll kind of get into like the 4 stages of the crisis here in a
Right,
minute.
right, right.
But what you're referring to is almost like the after effect, and that's the actual second crisis. And this is where the gaps in your training, this is where the Achilles heels in terms of policy. This is where the breakdown in the
Yes.
communication, this is where the assumptions lie. And here's the spiritual point. This is where the enemy knows where to attack.
Ah, very well said. Very well said. And you know what? We're going to put our audience in a scenario then. We're going to,
Sure.
I like to call this one the first 30 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's just say a serious incident just occurred at a church.
Mm-hmm.
Information is incomplete, as it always is in the initial phase.
Yeah.
Okay. People are frightened.
Okay.
Phones are ringing.
Sure.
And then social media posts are beginning to appear.
Yeah.
Okay. What should happen from a communication standpoint during those first 30 minutes?
Yeah, so let me preference this. So I am
Yeah.
assuming that this church or this faith-based organization already has an element of a crisis communication manual or plan.
Okay.
Right.
Let's
I'm
go
also,
with that.
Okay. And I'm also referencing that they probably have a safety team or some element of it in terms of people who have an awareness of emergency operations as well. So with that as a backdrop, what should people do in the first 30 minutes? So the first thing that's going to happen is what we call the first stage of crisis, and that's the shock. There's a shock that's going to happen. This is the element of surprise. People are caught off guard. Something unexpected happens.
Right.
You and I are in our normal routine of a Sunday morning service or some type of weekly service, and something very unexpected happens. The emotions become very high, which naturally means clarity becomes very low. Here it is for people who are not trained.
Right.
So the team should be able to figure out and identify what is the actual crisis itself. And then from there, they should be able to isolate it. Okay. Isolate whatever that particular said crisis is.
Okay.
And these are your practitioners, whether it's your safety teams, if it's an active killer, unfortunately, they need to neutralize the threat, isolate that, and then they need to begin their recovery stage process or protocols if they have one. From a communication standpoint, though, there needs to be a priority on your internal communication audience, which means that the volunteers, your paid staff, the pastors and your elder team, the individuals, the congregates, your parishioners, etc., there should be a priority on these individuals and letting them know that we are aware something is taking place.
Right.
We have measures in place. Please follow the direction of our security ministry and or safety team, depending on your verbiage.
Okay.
Follow the instructions of those individuals who are going to be leading through this particular said incident. Now, also too, people are going to be calling 911. There should be somebody designated specifically on that team who should be calling. Everybody don't need to be calling.
No, they don't.
No. And also on top of that, we got to consider a lot of live streams, because since the COVID pandemic, a lot of churches have been forced to be able to upgrade how they communicate digitally.
That's true.
So what's the key phrase? What's the code phrase to letting the AV audio team know, wait a minute, something has just happened in a sanctuary? Do we want to continue to live stream this so that everybody else on the internet and the online community sees what's going on?
That's good.
Or do we want to be able to have some type of code phrase to where the AV team knows it's time to switch screens, switch graphics?
Right.
It's time to do a transition slide, still record, but the online community should not be viewing exactly what's happening from an emergency standpoint.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
But these are things I'm assuming that are already in place as it relates to a communication plan. But also on top of that, what's the notification tree? What does that look like? Meaning that who is going to begin to be notified and in what particular said order? Because oftentimes you'll go to the second stage of a crisis. So if we deal with the shock value, something unexpected happened. Now you move to the second stage, which is the fog. And the fog could be very dense. It could be very blurry. The ability to have high visibility is likely very low. And so what is the fog? Oftentimes information is lacking. There's something that happens, But then it's like we're unclear exactly the totality, maybe what led up to it, maybe
Right.
who is all actually involved. Are
Right.
there other elements that have spawned off because of this particular said crisis or critical incident? What are the chain reactions, events that are also associated with this main incident that most people are going to hyper focus on? But then also on top of that, from a communication standpoint, Dr. Brown, there's going to be a lot of rumors.
Oh,
And, and,
absolutely.
and unfortunately, sometimes us in the church, we got above average degrees in gossip and rumors, right? Not your
Yeah.
ministry, maybe the one next
Yeah.
to you, right? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, people, because of their own biases and their own experiences, they're going to begin to fill the gaps when information is lacking. And this is where I like to slow down, especially for your listeners who are serving in like a senior leadership position at a
Right.
church. Oftentimes, what I've seen in my experience is the default setting for most pastors and elders of churches is, well, we don't want to say anything yet. We don't want to say anything yet.
Ah,
That's very damaging, especially
right.
at the second stage, because people are going to fill in the gaps themselves.
That's
And
right. That's
oftentimes,
right.
ministry leaders say, well, we don't have all the information yet. You don't need to have all the information. You have to let your internal audience, who is your congregates, your parishioners, volunteers, paid staff, etc., you have to let them know that you are aware that something is taking place and that your ministry is equipped to be able to handle that particular said emergency. So being able to get out in front of
Yes.
some type of emergency, that is what I'm a fan of, because naturally you're going to slide to the third stage if you don't communicate, and you're going to now feel the pressure. That's the pressure. So we got the shock, you got the fog. Third stage is naturally the pressure. And what is the pressure? The pressure
Right.
is now the spotlight is glaring on your ministry.
Right.
Now
Right.
everybody and their mama and their cousin Pookie and them, they all streaming live on their social media platforms. They're commenting on their social media
Right.
platforms.
Right.
And now the visibility is starting to increase. So what was
Ah,
once supposed to be something isolated, now it has actually grown or metastasized to such a degree that everybody in your community, and then eventually potentially around the country, could be aware of what's happening at your particular said time and place in your church. Because why? We live in a screenshot age,
right.
to where
Right. That's
everybody
true.
wants to screenshot, screen record everything. And I heard some great perspective in one of the sessions that I taught at that conference, to where they played a very popular band. I'm not going to say the band's name.
Right.
They played a very popular band and who has very strict copyright laws when there's a
Right.
critical incident, because individuals who begin to screen record and or begin to share the stream, they immediately, that platform will take that video down because of the copyright laws protected,
Oh,
which
okay.
is a very good strategic piece that should be talked about amongst you and your ministry of what would that look like for you all. Okay. But on this third stage still of pressure, now the questions are going to start to intensify, right? Now there's going to be a feeling of you kind of losing control. And this is the pressure coming from senior leadership of how they're going to navigate and or communicate, because the last stage is what we call the reaction. And
Okay.
in the reaction, this is where people are going to start to demand answers. This is where the narratives are really going to be formed. It doesn't mean that it has to be true the first time. Whatever piece of information people cling to during a high emotion event, people are going to naturally believe that. And this is
Yes.
what makes social media a
true.
lot of times very deadly, is because it doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be vetted. People just have to have an emotional reaction to something. They lock onto it and then they believe that. And that's what we call confirmation bias, to where you start to auditioning evidence to support whatever you saw allegedly the first time. And then lastly, this is where trust is either gained or lost.
Okay.
And this is the last point. Trust, it takes years to build, seconds to break,
Amen.
and then forever to potentially repair. Not
Yes.
forever to repair, forever to potentially repair.
Right.
Because people never forget how you were not as proactive during a crisis. So
Wow.
it is imperative on ministries to have these conversations in their ministry meetings. and to be able to talk amongst their leaders and their elders. You know what? What would this look like from a audience standpoint, a congregant standpoint? What would this look like if we did at least say something instead of just simply saying, well, no comment. We didn't have all the information. Because I'm telling you, people are going to naturally go through each four stages of the crisis: the shock, the fog, the pressure, and then lastly, the reaction.
Wow. Wow. And you know, that leads me to another point, because I want to talk about, like you mentioned, getting out in front of it, things of that nature. I want to talk about speed versus accuracy. Okay. And of course, as you mentioned, in today's world with social media and other forms of almost instant communication,
Yeah.
there's enormous pressure for churches to communicate immediately.
Sure.
But there, like as you mentioned, far as with the trust factor, there's enormous risk in communicating inaccurate information.
Sure.
So how should leaders balance the speed with the accuracy?
Yeah, so I'm assuming a lot of your audience members are part of some type of safety team to where they
Yes.
are potentially familiar with firearms, and so I'm gonna use that as an analogy.
Okay, let's go.
So in terms of when I used to work as a police officer, I served for 9 years as a police officer in uniform in St. Louis, and when we used to go to the firing range to qualify each year, we'll have different types of markers that we'll have to hit, whether it's the 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 25, 50-yard line, where we have to be able to have accuracy with our handgun.
Right.
And so the closer you are, you can rely on speed. You can rely on agility, right? You just have to
Yes.
ultimately, lack of better words, just point and shoot at the target, at the
Right,
silhouette.
right, correct.
But when you start moving back to more like the 15-yard line, the 25-yard line, now you have to depend on the sights, the iron
That's
sights
right.
that are on the front part of
Yes.
the barrel of the gun.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so now you have to have a slower trigger pull, and you have to rely upon the sights of the gun. And the further you continue to go back, the more
Yes.
you have to rely upon the sights, and you have to have a smooth, clean trigger pull for sure. So I give you that
Absolutely.
analogy because that's the same way when we're trying to understand the speed versus the accuracy. You're going to need both. Okay. The speed is the repetition of how you're going to be practicing tabletop exercises. So, for example, a safety team should be training at least once a month, whether it's virtually or in person, and you should have your communication strategist with you during that training. Because
Yes.
a lot of time the practitioners of who's going to be going in to either eliminate the threat or deal with the violent incident, they have a set of protocols that they're going to adhere to. But that comm strategist has a different type of perspective and or viewpoint that they're going to bring to that training. And this is where the repetitions are going to come in at. Where's the accuracy lie? The accuracy lies where the communication strategist rather is going to know how to ask the right questions.
That's
One of
the
my
key
mentors
right there.
used to
Yes.
tell me all the time, knowledge is having all the answers, but wisdom is knowing how to ask the right questions. And so a good communication strategist is going to know how to ask the right questions instead of just saying, well, how are we going to respond? Instead of saying that, a
Right.
communication strategist is going to say, what audience members needs to hear from us now?
Ah,
Which is a
yes.
different type of question, and it frames it the right way. So the speed is the repetition of being able to have multiple different reps of being a part of a round table, whether in person or virtually, and walking through a scenario and everybody understanding their roles. And then the accuracy is the ability to actually come in and know how to ask the right questions.
Yes. Thank you for breaking that down. I'm I'm going to ask a basic question right now.
Sure.
Is saying we don't know yet sometimes the most responsible thing an organization can say?
We should never say that. And here's the
Okay.
reason why.
Okay.
You never want to end and land on a negative.
Okay.
I am a fan of always figuring out how to land on a positive.
Okay.
Meaning that for your audience, we know Jesus died, but we also know he rose again.
This is right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If any preacher is worth his coins, he knows to never end on the actual death of Christ. Rather, it's the celebration on how he was able to get back up again. Right. So let's look at this from a critical incident. I don't know where these analogies are coming from, but praise the Lord, right? But now let's look at it from a critical incident based upon your simple question.
Okay.
Instead of saying we don't know, I am a fan of adding a connector there.
Okay.
Right? We don't know. However, what I can tell you is this.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Because oftentimes when we just say, well, I don't know, and then you say, well, no comment, the perception from the media could be, you probably
what are they
something.
hiding? Yes.
Your congregants are like, some smell fishy.
Yeah.
What are they really cooking up behind closed doors?
Yeah.
And so now you're dealing with another crisis of the overall perception based upon simply saying, I don't know. But I am a fan. How can we connect that to be able to take that negative land and make it into a positive land? And the way we do it is, instead of saying, I don't know, we should say, I don't know. However, what I can confirm, what I can tell you right now, and then go into whatever the details are about that particular setting.
I love it. That's perfect. That's a good one. I'm going to pivot right here, Monty.
Sure.
And we're going to talk about the spokesperson.
Okay.
Okay. And we know it's a common assumption that the senior pastor should be the spokesperson for the church because the senior pastor leads the church. Is this always the right crisis spokesperson?
I'm a little bit leery of the phrasing of the question of always, okay? Because there's always going to be caveats to every type of crisis. Now, I think as a general rule and thumb, I think it's a good best practice that congregants hear from senior leadership.
Right.
Because the caveat could be, let's say, unfortunately, God forbid, the pastor is involved in, let's say, a moral failure. I don't think the pastor should be speaking regarding with that. This is where legal team, the elders, as well as a communication strategist needs to be behind closed doors. And we need to talk about what we call a media cadence. How we're going to roll out this particular set of information and how we're going to do it the best way by balancing the sensitivity of the nature of it as well as the accuracy of the information.
Okay.
Now, what I am a fan of, and when you're referencing a spokesperson, this is why I'm building a case for why churches and faith-based organizations should have what we call a communication strategist.
Right.
Now, this person is not like a social media posting every couple of days or every week about community outreach. That's not what this person is.
No.
This person is a part of the senior leadership team.
Right.
This person is almost an advisor to the senior pastor, as well as very connected with the elders of the church or the decision makers of the church, if you have deacons as well, etc.
Right.
This person's sole responsibility as a visual is to be able to wrap their arms around anything related to communications internally, as well as being able to translate what the external communication efforts should look like. So communication strategist is not the person that's always going to be in front of the camera representing that organization. Rather, they're the one orchestrating things behind the scenes, preparing the one who is going to be what we call the validator for whatever particular segment, news segment, or story that is to come. But again, as a general principle, I am a fan of people being able to hear from senior leadership with a communication strategist advising them on the current best practices, right? Because there are different incidents that may call for someone else in the church to also be able to speak as a validator and not necessarily the senior pastor every single time.
That makes sense. That was very well said. Thank you for unpacking that.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Yeah.
Now, it's something I just want to touch on this real quick because you spoke on it earlier about social media
Sure.
and the possibility of inaccurate information getting out there.
Hmm.
But I have a pointed question about that. What's the danger of church leaders or staff members responding individually to
Hmm.
online criticism, speculation, or misinformation?
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I mean, you and I both know, Dr. Brown, we live in an age to where everything can be screenshotted.
Yes.
And if it can be
Yeah,
screenshotted, that means that it could be scrutinized.
that's right.
And so when you have members on your team who are not authorized spokespersons and or validators from your particular ministry, it is very dangerous for them to just be able to comment and
Yes.
to speak from their own opinions
Right.
and or their own lived experiences, and that can be convoluted into the overall narrative, and you can lose control of the centralized narrative and the story because people
True.
now
That's
want to be
true.
able to dance on their own soapbox, whether
Hmm.
it's culture issues, political, personal, etc., you name it. And people are more inclined to just believe things because they see
Right.
it on social media without any type of verification, without any type of checking with other sources or corroborating with other sources, etc. And it's very damaging, if you will. And this is why I am a huge fan of a crisis communication manual that actually
Yeah.
talks about this. We
Yes.
have to have in there some type of social media policy. Now, are you going to
Absolutely.
try to control everybody's cell phone that comes in your church? No, we're not talking
No.
about that.
No. No.
But
No.
but if you lay the parameters, if you lay the frameworks, especially for your volunteer staff, your paid staff, those who actually serve in the ministry, we can have a little bit more, I would say, oversight over that
Right.
instead of someone who's a visitor, because we're not going to be able to control that.
No.
But
No.
but the ones who are part of the ministry, this is where we have to tighten the belt a little bit more, because we people have to realize that they're not just speaking on their own will. They
That's
they
right.
are speaking on behalf of the ministry, and a lot of times people in the community, when they see that you're affiliated with the ministry and they see you making
Hmm.
other comments, they don't know when you and I are on and
Yeah.
off the clock.
Yeah. They don't separate the
they
two.
they
Right.
they don't separate. What they see
Right.
is a collective identity.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, when you're talking about narratives around social media, the Barna Group did a study, and they realized that millennials, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, we would go through 3 football fields scrolling worth of content a day. And with that, that means that there are messages, agendas, demonic principalities that are influencing yours and my subconscious brain. Here it
Right.
is,
Right.
without our permission.
That's true. Absolutely.
And so because of the nature of social media has really changed, meaning that it used to be about a platform connecting individuals to their friends that
Correct.
they know,
Yes.
maybe have same classes with.
Right.
Now you fast forward 10, 15 years, now social media is purely algorithmic by nature,
Yes.
which means it doesn't matter who you're connected to, it's predictive content.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like it keeps recommending things
That's right.
to you and I. We'll go from cat videos to conspiracy theories and then to the cross. And then we're like,
Yes, you're
you
right.
you wondering why you depressed and why you feel just like, ugh. It's because the algorithm has gotten a hold of you, and now you're going down this particular sad rabbit hole very quickly.
Right. That's right.
Well, think about that. If there was something critical to happen at your church, now somebody who's speaking on behalf of your ministry was not given permission to speak on it, and now they share it with their online community.
Yeah.
Somebody else sees that, and because spiritually they don't have the ability to discern, they believe whatever comes at face value, and the next thing you know, they're like, see, I knew it. I knew about that ministry. I knew about Pastor so and so, or I knew about Minister so and so. And now they're just spreading all this unfortunate
That's
false
right.
information.
Wow. Wow. I need to I need to pivot here, and I'm trying to
Sure.
figure out a nice, smooth way to do it.
Hmm.
Let's talk about dealing with the media.
Call it out. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Now, we all know a serious incident can put a church that's never dealt with the news media,
Sure.
automatically they're in the national spotlight now.
Oh yeah.
So, what should leaders, and this is very, very important,
Hmm.
what should leaders understand about interacting with reporters
Hmm.
during a crisis?
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question. Talk about this a lot because oftentimes there is this glaring narrative that the media is the adversary and or
That's
the
right.
media doesn't like us. The media will spin stories, and what they're referring to is individuals that they probably have experienced in the past or different type of news outlets that they've seen stories being reported on, and
Right.
maybe all of the facts were not presented in that particular segment.
Hmm.
And so, what I am a fan of is professionally, I believe we should have a working relationship with our media partners.
Yes.
If you live in a city
Absolutely.
or a town to where you still have newspapers or radio station, and that's the majority way of how your community consumes content, I
Right.
think we should professionally still have a working relationship. So,
I
what I
agree.
am a fan of is that your communication strategist should be able to initiate a field trip to where you go up to your local news station and you introduce yourself. They will love that. Do
Yes.
this before a crisis actually happens
Right.
in your said town or city.
That's
Because
right.
crisis is not a great time to pass out your business card, by the way. All right.
No, it's not. No.
And so I am a huge fan of that communication strategist being proactive and initiating the
Yes.
conversations. Well,
Yes.
Monty, I don't know if I ever talk to him again. Well, it doesn't matter. You're giving them a point of reference, a point of contact. So when there is an incident, they at least have a
Right.
connection point and or some type of rapport that has been established, and
Right.
they can have that person to say, you know what, I met so and so at this particular said church, and I think that's the person we need to talk to. Let's reach out to
Right.
him or her.
Right. Right.
That can go a long way, a
Yes, it
very
can.
long way. But then
Yes.
also too, it'll give you an opportunity to be able to establish what does a win-win scenario look like for us. Meaning that when something is to critically happen at our church or on one of our campuses, how does the media partners, how do you guys like to receive the information? And so it's a great opportunity for you to learn how do they operate if there is a critical incident, and then
Yes.
it's an opportunity for them to be able to come into your shop and be able to learn, okay, here's some of the things that we're going to be working around.
Hmm.
And so that way it gives both of you guys a healthy perspective, and now you guys can kind of gauge based upon that field trip and or the content that you guys are going to put out, what will make sense for the greater community. Because let's be for real, the media partners, they do have a lever that they can pull that you and I don't have.
That's true.
They have access to a community of folks nationally that you and I would never have access to.
Right.
We may not be able to control exactly what they say or what they report about us,
Right.
but what we can control are the facts that we put out and the
That's right.
timeliness in which we put those facts out.
That's right.
Because we
Absolutely.
can't delay things and then expect the media to still report on things accurately because they're operating on certain deadlines.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
And so I
That's
think
true.
it's fair for us to figure out what will a win-win scenario actually look like. So I'm a fan of being proactive and actually initiating that relationship.
Yes, yes. And to still continuing with the media, I know you spoke to the issue of saying no comment,
Mm.
but the question I want to ask on this topic is
Hmm.
how can leaders remain transparent
Hmm.
without releasing information that could interfere with an investigation or violate someone's privacy or
Sure.
cause additional harm, which we definitely don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going back to your original question. This is where the preparation of a crisis communication plan, tabletop exercise, think sessions, these are where these opportunities are going to present itself. Meaning
Okay.
that in these training sessions, the questions should be asked amongst your training staff. your folks who are your legal team, your senior staff of the church.
Mhm.
This is where you have to practice behind closed doors. So what I do typically in my training that I host for faith leaders as well as executive teams, a part of faith-based organizations, we'll kind of run through a scenario that deals with the very verbiage, and I give you some of those examples. So if there's
Okay.
like a personnel matter or a personnel issue, oftentimes the default will be no comment, and your legal team will advise this is pending litigation, so we're not going to say anything.
Okay.
A communication strategist professionally would give another perspective and will offer food for thought and say, hey, instead of us just simply saying no comment about this personnel matter, could we potentially say, at this particular church, we are fully aware of the interactions and or incident that has involved this particular said ministry. We are cooperating fully with local law enforcement professionals, and we are in prayer for those individuals involved in this particular said incident. Now, that would resonate a lot better with community members and stakeholders
Yes.
instead of just saying no comment pending litigation, because it sounds as if we're still trying to hide behind
Yes, yes,
something.
that connotation is still there.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you're right. You're
And
right.
so here's the idea. It's just a human psychology deal to where when people are in a crisis, psychological safety has to be there. So the word choices we have and what we use, especially during a crisis, is that much more imperative. And so I'm a huge fan of running through faith leaders and elders through an exercise that deals specifically with word choices and why words actually matter and what we're communicating to the public.
Wow. Okay. On that vein, since you took us there,
Sure.
we dealt with the media, but I'm gonna take it a different direction. And this is
Okay.
gonna be a somewhat difficult scenario, but
Okay.
say the crisis reveals that the church made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps a policy wasn't followed.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership missed a warning sign, or some sort of organizational failure contributed to what happened.
Yeah.
How should leadership communicate
Mm-hmm.
when the organization bears some responsibility?
Yeah. And so that again, there's so many other variables that can factor into this.
Right.
If it's a criminal related matter, local law enforcement is going to run the point, and they're going to be the lead investigating body in our bureau. And so
Okay.
we would have to yield to their investigative efforts and strategy, because you don't want to compromise an investigation that the law enforcement partners are actually spearheading. And so
Okay.
there are other variables that can factor in. But let's say, for example, we did fall short. This is where words are going to matter even more. I am a
Yes.
fan of being able to admit when we get things wrong. Ministries mess up when they know they've committed some type of fault or ill against a fellow brother and sister in Christ, and then they try to hide it and have self-preservation, while the other party end up understanding that, you were at fault, nothing was ever said, and now there's water underneath the bridge that still hasn't been dealt with.
Okay.
So naturally, people are going to do what Adam and Eve did in the Garden of Eden. And when they got caught up doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, now the first reaction is to hide and try to cover themselves.
Right.
We
Right.
see the same principle happening when ministries get things wrong. And I don't know why it's such a hard struggle for some ministries to admit when they mess things up. And I'm a fan of having specific verbiage of acknowledging and being able to apologize. And there are a lot of ministries who actually do this. They're like, hey, we messed up. And I'm a huge fan of the verbiage of when we fall short, we will hold not only ourselves accountable, but everybody involved as well. Most communities are forgiven. They will realize that, you know what, you're human. We're not
That's
supposed
right.
to be following you. We're following Christ.
That's right. That's right.
We
Very
should,
good point.
we shouldn't be shocked when our fellow human brothers and sisters, when they fall. That's a part of the human nature, right?
Right.
Sin is going to make you stupid. Okay, I
That's
don't know if I can say that, right? So I mean, let's just deal with the elephant in the room. But
Right.
when we are communicating, though, most communities already kind of have an idea already, especially your internal audience, especially if
Right.
they've been serving in your ministry. I am a fan, though, of being able to have specific verbiage that we can still communicate and say, that we can bite the bullet and say, when we mess up, we're going to hold not only ourselves accountable, but others as well. But also, we apologize because we missed the mark. However, we're in the process of retraining. We are updating our policies.
Yes.
We have accountability that has been restructured. And these are the items that you're now having a good landing on, and you're given an element of reassurance to your greater community that you have this under control.
And you know what, you spoke to somebody that I've learned in my corporate life when I was corporate security is countermeasures.
Yeah.
You communicate good countermeasures. You'd be amazed how much that alleviates the pain from a situation.
Absolutely.
If you can communicate good countermeasures to whatever happened. So now,
100%.
Monty, we're going to go a different direction here as we wind down. And I have this in every episode. It's called the Faith Secure question, and it's something practical. Okay. So if every church in America could take only 3 steps this week to improve its crisis communications preparedness, what would you tell them to do?
Wow. Okay, 3 steps.
3 steps.
Yeah. Well, the first one would be to do an audit and ask yourself the question, do you already have a plan? If not, shameless plug here, I've actually created a 47-step checklist designed for ministries as well as faith leaders to kind of help guide the conversation. Because I could be honest, it can seem like a daunting task. It can feel as if some ministries may feel like they're living in denial, like, no, that never happened here. We're already good. We already got that. But when I begin to ask questions, they're like, yeah, well, we don't have that, what you're referencing. Again, I'm a huge fan of the preparation. A good comm strategist knows how to ask the right questions. And so the first step I would recommend, not only an audit, but if you don't have a crisis comms plan, I've created a 47-step checklist. It's available on my website. Just go to monumentalaccess.com and then just go to courses, and then you can read more about that 47-point checklist. And it actually mirrors the 4 stages of a crisis, and it gives you the items that you want to be thinking about as you're navigating through each one of the stages. But also, too, the third point that I would recommend for churches as well is to train with your communication strategists, because this is what I'm seeing happening in most churches. We're having an elevated training when it comes to firearms and handguns and defensive tactics. But when it comes times to how we communicate those things, it's like, I've never thought about bringing a communication strategist to our firearms training or active shooter scenario. And it's like, why not? Because they're going to have a greater responsibility to be able to communicate this over the long term versus the immediacy of stopping the threat. So I'm a huge fan of that collaborative training that ministries can have. So first step, again, do an audit of your own policy. Do you have a crisis comm plan? If not, number 2, I recommend that 47-point checklist that I've created for faith leaders and community faith-based organizations. And number 3, collaborative training with individuals a part of your safety team. And you need to continue to do that in a typical cadence, whether it's weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, whatever makes sense for you all in your ministry. So
I love it. And Monty, I'm going to get you out of here with the closing question here, okay?
Yeah.
And I always like to end with the church leader who's listening and thinking right now.
Okay.
We're a church. We're never going to be dealing with the national media. Okay. Why do we need a crisis communication plan? What do you say to that leader?
What I would say to that leader, based upon that question, ego slows you down, humility speeds you up.
All right. You got to unpack that, Monty. Take it further. Go deeper.
I got you. So what I'm referencing is that when ministry leaders say questions like that or responses like that, I'm concerned.
Because as am I.
we are all students, and we are all servant leaders, and we're all disciples of Christ. And if we're continuing to be learning, especially on this side of life, nobody has arrived yet. And will it hurt to be able to do an audit? If we were to run your ministry through a stress test,
Hmm.
how confident would you be that all the mechanisms that you have in place would run seamlessly?
Right.
This is why I'm a fan of the tabletop related exercise,
Yes.
because
Yes.
ministers who feel as if they already got everything together and they already know everything, that ego, I'm telling you, it will slow you down in a heartbeat. And you know the acronym for ego, right? Edging God out. We'll leave it there. And
Yes,
so
indeed.
when that ego begins to creep in, I get very concerned. But the ministry leaders that I see who continue to ask the questions will be like, you know what? Tell me more about this. What does this look like in
Right.
practice? Because we have this, but what can we do more? That tells me that they're willing to humble themselves and to
Right.
figure out that, you know what? Maybe we don't have everything figured out. Maybe we need to
Right.
have somebody to go through some refresher training. Okay. Because I wouldn't dare
Absolutely.
try to step in the pulpit and take the mic from a senior pastor and be like, well, let me take you to the cross better. Like, I wouldn't do that because I know my
Right.
lane, right? I know my
Right. Right.
lane.
Right.
The same thing applies to when we're talking about critical incidents. There are
Wow.
people that God has in these positions for a reason. And we have
Yes.
built our
That's right.
careers on for moments like this. And so
Yes.
our track
Yes.
records and our professional background, I mean, they speak for themselves. We don't have to go into the details about that. And so
Wow.
one of my passions is to remove the scales, here we go,
Uh-huh.
off
Uh-huh.
the eyes of a
Uh-huh.
lot of ministry leaders so that they stop assuming the blurriness was actually truth.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Monty, thank you for joining me
Oh,
and helping us understand this something
yes,
that's
sir.
critically important, man.
Yes, sir.
Crisis communication is
Yes.
crisis leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We know that, as you mentioned earlier, churches
Mm-hmm.
cannot control every incident they may encounter, but they can prepare for how they will communicate when something happens.
Absolutely.
Because in a crisis, people aren't simply listening for information, they
Mm-hmm.
are looking for leadership.
Sure.
They're looking for clarity,
Mm-hmm.
credibility,
Mm-hmm.
compassion, and confidence.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
before we close, please tell our audience how they can learn more about Monumental Access
Mm-hmm.
and create with your work in that 47-point plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to my website, monumentalaccess.com. You can read more about me. I have courses that are also available. So if you're ready and you're saying, well, Monty, I don't know if we have it in our budget to maybe
Mm-hmm.
afford a new person who can come in as a comm strategist. You may have somebody on your team who kind of has a knack or an eye for communication and or
Right,
strategy.
right.
I created a 5-point digital module that walks somebody who's a novice and gives them best practices and tips.
Beautiful.
And that whole course is available on my website. It's 5 different parts. We go a lot more in detail what each different subject matter, how to deal with the initial shock of a critical incident all the way to the post
Right.
recovery as well. And give you some best practices associated with that. That's available on my website. Also, the 47-point checklist as well. But I'm really looking to work with ministries who are serious. I I
Yes.
I like to add value. No need in trying to waste time or anything like that. If you're serious about wanting to go to the next step and or develop
Right.
preparation, I do have a tab on my website to where you can get in contact with me, fill out the short form, and then somebody from my team will be in contact, and then we'll set up a discovery call rather, to ensure that I'm in line with your ministry to make sure I'm the
Yeah.
right fit. But please check out more on my website and you can learn more about me and the work that I do.
Outstanding. Let's give us that website one more time, my friend.
Yeah, the website again is monumentalaccess.com. Feel free to click on any of the tabs to learn more information about me and or to get in contact with me to schedule a discovery call.
Monty, thank you for being on today, man. You dropped nuggets all over the place. I
Oh yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Deeply humble, my friend. It's always a pleasure, Dr. Brown, catching up with you.
Yes, sir. And to everyone that's watching, if you found the content on this podcast to be informative, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until the next time, remember to remain watchful, prayerful, and prepared. God bless.